Friends, today I'm bringing you an opening that's going to help you win a ton of games. It's super easy to play for starters, and on top of that, it's going to get you amazing results because most people don't know how to play against it. That's the most important thing of all. We've seen this opening on the channel before, but today we're going to dig a little deeper. We're talking about the bishop's opening, bishop to c4. All right, we're used to, right? To playing knight to f3 first, usually, right? To attack this pawn to keep up the initiative. However, bishop to c4 right away is something you almost never see in any game. That's why it hides so many secrets. And there are a lot of advantages to not developing this knight to f3 yet. We're going to see that next. All right, so how should we play when we go for bishop to c4? Well, the most typical response from black is to play knight to f6. Why is that? Well, logically, they're developing one of their four minor pieces, and most importantly of all, they're threatening this pawn right here. In other words, it's the only developing move that keeps the initiative because it forces us to defend the d4 pawn. That's why it's the most commonly played move. So, how should we defend this pawn? The move we're going to use is d3. Basically, we've developed our bishop. Now we can play d3 because we're no longer blocking its way out. Plus, we're opening up a path for our other dark squared bishop. Now, I'm going to explain what our plans are in this opening because you're really going to like it, even for playing in your own tournaments, okay? A completely logical move for black here is bishop to c5. In fact, players with less than 2000 LO or less than 1800 LO usually always make the same moves: knight to f6, bishop to c5, just like in the Italian opening, right? That's why these two moves are the most common. Careful though, they're good moves. They're developing naturally. We're going to keep developing this knight here, knight to c3. Remember well when you play this opening with the bishop, for now, don't develop the knight to f3, but rather the knight to c3. Why? Because we usually have two main plans that you need to remember in this opening. One would be the move f4, right? If the knight is on f3, we wouldn't be able to make this advance. And the other plan would be the bishop pin with g5. We can use these two plans depending on what suits us best. For example, if they castle right away here, a really great move is bishop to g5, pinning this knight on f6. You can't even imagine how good this move is. Since we haven't developed the knight to f3, we've gained a tempo, because now we're threatening to jump with the knight to d5, putting a ton of pressure on this knight on f6. This definitely looks extremely dangerous for black, since it's really tough for them to defend. I mean, if this pawn were on d6, they could play the knight from b to d7, but since the pawn isn't on d6, they can't come over to defend this knight. So if they play d6, we could immediately bring in this knight and put a ton of pressure on them. If they then play knight to d7, our plan would be to keep up the pressure, and I'm going to explain that to you now. But first, you need to know something that's going to give you goosebumps. What happens if they try to kick out this bishop? It seems pretty logical, right? If they kick out this bishop, well, we could play bishop to a4, a very natural move to keep the pin. However, here we have a wonderful move, the classic fishing pole with h4. In this opening, it works really well. It works really well. Why? Because without the knight on f3, we have a clear path for the queen to join the attack. Great idea. Before we go on, just a quick thing. If you've been watching my videos for a while and want to take the next step, I have the perfect academy for you. Weekly classes with me and a FIDE master, videos even better than the ones you see here on YouTube. Plus, you'll get access to more than 50 interactive courses, a personalized lesson for you every day, each with 10 steps. Well, you'll see for yourself. It's amazing. And right now, you can join for 7 days for just €1, risk-free, so you can try it out. The link is right down here in the description. So why are we a chess teacher giving away the bishop? Can someone explain it to me? Well, simply put, if they capture this bishop, so you understand me, if they don't capture it, then the pin stays active and they haven't achieved anything with the move h6. It's that simple, right? So what happens if they do capture? We recapture with the pawn, pawn takes g5, and now we're threatening this knight. The knight, which was the real defender of the king side, not only defends the h7 square, but also these two squares, which are the entry points for the queen. In other words, the knight is under threat, and when it moves, the winning move is queen to h5, creating a powerful battery. The rook and queen are attacking the knight, a knight that's doomed to fall. And not only that, but here we're going to checkmate no matter what. So if they slip up, of course we deliver mate, but usually they'll try to escape. They can't escape with this pawn thanks to our bishop. You see that? This pawn is pinned. They might try to run with the rooks so that when we capture, the king can escape, and then when the queen comes over here, the king keeps running. So there's a way to finish things off really easily. Remember this well. When they try to escape with the rook, all you have to do is queen takes f2. Sorry, queen takes f7. It's important to capture here before taking the knight, forcing the king to move over here now. And the simplest way to finish is by sacrificing our rook for the knight, rook takes h7 check, forcing the black king to capture. And now, simply thanks to our bishop, we've already won the game. Queen to h5 would be checkmate, since the king can't escape behind or in front. It's that simple. E4, E5, we first play bishop to C4. It's important to bring out the bishop first. Knight to F6, we defend the pawn with D3, bishop to C5, and now knight to C3. Remember well, if they castle here, the winning plan is bishop to G5. But what happens if they don't castle? Let's say, for example, they play the move d6, which is one of the moves I see most often in this position. Since they've developed the knight and the bishop, now they want to try to develop their other bishop and their other knight, and the move d6 seems perfect. It defends the central point, opens up the way for the light squared bishop, and they can castle on the next move. All of this seems perfect. However, this is where our plan of f4 comes in, a really strong plan. Don't worry, even if you forget the ideas or mix up the terms, if you try to play bishop to g5 or things like that, you'll still be doing just fine. This opening is played in a very comfortable way. However, here, the strongest plan of all when they play d6 against you, which, as you know, is a very popular setup for black, is that f4 is an extremely strong move. What does f4 threaten? Well, the threats here are simple, and in fact, we have two. One would be to capture here, for example, play knight to f3 and put a lot of pressure on this pawn right here. Pay close attention here to the great move we have by not having developed our knight yet, because if we had developed this knight, the pawn wouldn't be able to advance, right? With the pawn on f4, we can place the knight behind it, and both pieces are putting a lot of pressure on the d5 square, gaining a ton of space. Also, we can capture, castle, and place our rook on this file, along with the bishop, to put tremendous pressure with all our pieces on this point. Very good. That's one threat, right? Capture. Another threat is to advance. This way, we trap the bishop on c8, which can't get out past d7. And not only that, but we also gain a huge space advantage on the king side, right? So we have two clear threats. The first would be to capture, and the second to advance. That's why a lot of people decide to capture. But if they do, they simply leave us with a huge development advantage. We've developed both our bishops to really great squares. After that, we'll play knight to f3 and castle, and once again, we'll have the rook on a super favorable square. So here, the move I run into the most, what is it when I play f4? Well, the move I see the most isn't capturing or letting themselves be captured or anything like that. The move I see the most is knight to g4. It's a move that, at first glance, they always try to play against us. A lot of people are tempted to try this typical attack that's kind of like the fried liver, right? Or what's this attack called again? The Fegatello attack, right? Knight to f2, attacking the queen and also the rook. What they don't realize is that this attack isn't a good one against the bishop's opening. They probably think we're playing something weird. Knight's not out, we haven't castled, and this pawn is placed oddly. They'll think we're being weird, but they're the ones playing strangely. They're miscoordinating their pieces, they've only got two, and they won't accomplish anything with that. We continue with the brilliant move f5. Why is it so important? To throw the opponent's pieces out of coordination. We don't care if they try to go for the Fegatello attack, attacking the queen and the rook, because at this point, it's already too late. Our pieces are well coordinated, and the queen and bishop can join the attack, while their pieces can't get in anywhere. Here, we would continue as follows. They attack our queen and our rook. We'll bring the queen to h5. It's already too late for our opponent to defend. Thanks to our bishop on c4, perfectly placed, we're threatening checkmate in one. They can't advance because they're pinned. Pushing here would be a huge mistake because after capturing, you couldn't recapture with the h pawn since the rook is completely pinned. You'd have to recapture with the g pawn, leaving the king completely exposed on the file, and the line would end up being lost. That's why here, the most common move to stop this threat is short castling. At first glance, it seems like a good move, right? The king and the rook both defend those two squares. However, they're already way too late. There's no way to stop the attack from the white pieces. So, how should we continue? Well, here, the strongest response we have is this. We bring one of our remaining pieces into the attack with tempo. Bishop to g5, directly targeting the queen on d8, which really only has two squares to go to, right? Queen to d7 or queen to d8. It really doesn't matter to us where she goes. It makes absolutely no difference because we have a clear advantage in activity. That is, our pieces, pay attention, okay? Knight, bishop, bishop, and queen are all attacking the enemy king. While it's true they could capture our rook, they could do whatever they want, but even so, we've already won. Now we bring in the last piece we have left, knight to d5. A lot of people might think we're attacking the square, but we're not. What we're actually doing is, well, it doesn't matter what they do. Look, okay, they have a rook and a knight up, but even so, we have so much attacking power that they can't do anything. The win and move here is a double exclamation mark move. Whenever you want, you can pause the video to try to guess it. I'll give you 3 seconds if you want to practice. And the key move is knight to f6, double exclamation mark. Obviously, you have to capture this knight for two reasons. It's giving check, it's going to take the queen, and it's going to deliver checkmate. You absolutely have to capture this knight. And once it's captured, there's no direct check, but there's the move bishop takes f6, pinning the enemy king. And honestly, there's no move that can stop this check and then the mate on g7. For example, knight to d6, attacking the bishop, doesn't matter to us. Queen to g5 check and queen to g7 checkmate. If you're more aggressive players, I recommend that when they play knight to f6, attacking this pawn, instead of the move we just mentioned, d3 defending, you go into a very interesting line that I once talked about on the channel, though not in as much depth. The move is d4. Very, very, very interesting. It's true, we're not defending this d4 pawn, and they can capture it. But this is a mistake, my friends, because after pawn takes pawn, d takes e5, this knight is going to be hard to get out. This knight is hard to retreat. For example, these two squares are defended by our awesome pawn on e5. Here it's covered by the bishop, here by the pawn. Here it's not covered by anything, but it would have serious problems with threats. That is, if it tried to retreat now, we could come here and threaten a lot, right? This knight is in trouble. So here, the most common move according to the database is bishop to c5 again. Very interesting. I won't say it's not. They're threatening this f2 square again. Thanks to these videos, you're starting to lose your fear of these kinds of threats, right? A lot of you are probably thinking here that you should play, for example, bishop to d3 or knight to a3, right? Trying to defend against this attack from the black pieces. However, many times we just focus on defending when, in reality, we actually have advantageous attacking positions ourselves. For example, let me give you an example here. You could sacrifice the bishop on f7, check, and now bring in the queen and you'd win back this knight. So you'd end up a pawn ahead, and not only that, but your opponent's king would be completely exposed, right? This would be an example of how you could win without having to defend this square here. But sometimes stronger attacks exist without sacrificing pieces. For example, you can play queen to d5. In some Scotch Gambit variations, this d5 battery is very strong. We're threatening checkmate and attacking the knight at the same time. The intermediate move, knight to g5, doesn't work as a defense because we would just capture it and then go into f7. That's why here, for example, black should castle. But what happens if they try to castle? We can keep attacking. So how can we keep attacking? Well, for example, we could capture this knight here. All right. You might be surprised to learn what the most common move is here for black. The most common move of all is before castling to capture and give a check. And that makes a lot of sense. I'm going to show you why, because I'm sure a lot of you are thinking about it. Here, when we play queen to d5 instead of castling, they realize they can give this check, right? Because yes, we're threatening checkmate, but if we're giving check, the king has to move. But that doesn't worry us, since we're still threatening checkmate, and once they move, we can capture this knight, right? What if black's pieces get in? A pawn, but now we're attacking a bishop that definitely has to retreat. And not only that, but now we're launching a massive attack on the enemy king. First of all, we develop our knight to f3, for example, and as we can see, all the pieces are coordinating to attack the enemy king. For example, here the most common move is c6, preparing two things: the retreat of their bishop, which isn't doing much anymore, and the possible, right? The move d5 to open up the position a bit, since we have the king in the center, makes a lot of sense. However, they don't get there in time. The winning combination here is as follows: bishop to d3, so that we threaten checkmate. Very often, the threats we make force our opponent to create weaknesses. They have to weaken themselves. With which move? G6. Logically, here it wouldn't be possible, for example, to play f5 to stop the threat, because we would capture en passant and the threat would still be there, right? They have to play g6. And what does that do? With pawns on white squares, no one defends the dark squares, so the bishop can come in. You might consider bishop to h6. Great move. Here we're actually helping our opponent. Better is bishop g5, threatening the queen. We threaten the queen, and not only that, but we basically have the game won with the next move, bishop to f6. All of this is starting to sound familiar, isn't it? After the move g5, which is the most commonly played, we bring the queen into the attack. I'm showing you all of this so you understand how you can win, because if I just teach you the three opening moves, then you won't know how to continue. I prefer to explain everything properly, and here we're threatening queen to h6, playing for mate. Sorry, winning with checkmate. The only move that stops it is h5, but now I'm going to let you think for 3 seconds about a brilliant move that finishes the game. All right, let's see who can find it. You can pause the video if you want to take a moment to think about it. The best move here is the brilliant queen sacrifice. Very hard to spot, my friends. Very hard to see. Queen takes h5. Obviously, they have to take the queen because otherwise we're coming in with queen to 8-8 checkmate. So when the queen is captured, look at this wonderful move, huh? Knight to g5 and checkmate on h7 is unavoidable. The king can't move to any square, and not only that, but you also can't give the king any escape. So here, no matter what black does, we simply play bishop to h7, checkmate. Wonderful. Of course, we just saw that by playing d4, this more aggressive line. If they took our pawn on e4, we would come out ahead. But the correct response from black is to capture the pawn on d4. Chess teacher, you can't leave without telling me what to do if they play the correct response. Well, in this case, we wouldn't recapture right away. It wouldn't be a bad move, but I recommend a much better one, which is now knight to f3. A much better move? Chess teacher, you're going crazy, and now you're leaving the other pawn hanging here. Our opponent has two extra pawns. Well, now we can get one back, right? So technically, we're down a pawn. But in exchange for what? In exchange for tremendous activity. The queen is active, threatening the knight. So we have the initiative. This knight has to move. It can't be defended with d5 because we would simply capture the pawn. So it has to move. We have the bishop and the knight developed, and we're going to castle on the next move. For example, if they play knight to d6, which is the most popular response to threaten our bishop, we castle short. Situation. We have two pieces and the queen active, and we've already castled. Our opponent has all their pieces on the 8th rank, can't castle yet, and their knight is holding them back a bit. The best response for black seems to be knight takes on c4, taking away our pair of bishops and a powerful bishop. However, at this point, we already have the game won. How do you feel about that? We've already won the game. The right move is in queen takes knight, which would still leave us with an advantage, but actually rook to e1, a fantastic in-between move. We check the thing. How can they stop this check in two moves? Well, they could give up the knight, but all that would do is just delay their downfall by one more move, right? They could play queen to e7, giving up the queen, which is a huge mistake, but bishop to e7 is also a huge mistake. Why? Because it stops defending the g7 square. Queen takes on g7 is going to win the game. Remember, right now we're down a piece. Down a piece. They've captured our knight. Even so, we're threatening the rook. And now we finish it off here with bishop to h6, and as you can see, checkmate is inevitable. What do you mean inevitable, ChessTeacher? It's well defended. No, because after queen takes on f8, it's checkmate. You can't capture with the king because of the bishop, and you can't capture with the bishop because it's pinned thanks to our rook on e1. Check out how powerful that rook pin is. The sharpest among you may have noticed that after capturing this pawn, instead of playing knight to d6, they could play knight to f6, right? That's a very natural move and doesn't block anything at all. But don't worry, because I'm going to show you a quick plan that will always work for you. Remember these ideas well, because you're going to win a lot of games this way. We come to pin this knight, right, with this bishop. We pin the queen. Very good. Our opponent can do anything now. The most sensible move, without a doubt, is to play bishop to e7, defending against this extremely strong pin. Otherwise, we could start exchanging these pieces. Having two doubled and isolated pawns on the d and f files wouldn't be a good idea. And now we switch plans. Knight to c3. Why? Not just to add attackers, but to castle long. Very good idea. For example, things you should know about this opening. If your queen is attacked, where should you put her? If your queen is attacked, you should put her on h4. Why? Because it's extremely hard to kick her out from there. They can't drive her out from anywhere. Something people often try against me is h6, a move that doesn't do anything because they're not threatening our bishop, since the rook is undefended. So here, a better move would be, for example, to castle, right? Now, they could play h6 afterwards, couldn't they? We castle long, placing the rook on the same file as the queen. Very good move. We're in a wonderful position, and from here, we're creating very strong threats. For example, bishop to d3. You don't need to memorize all of this. You just need to understand it so you can apply it in your own games. We're threatening checkmate with the queen and bishop. Basically, what we would need to do is bishop takes knight, removing that piece and delivering checkmate. This is the most obvious of all. How can black try to get out of this situation? For example, by playing h6. Why? Because now, if we trade, what would happen? There would no longer be queen takes h7 checkmate, since this pawn would be blocking it. So how do we continue? Well, in a simple way. This way we can even sacrifice the bishop. Bishop takes h6, pawn takes h6, and queen takes h6. So now checkmate is going to be inevitable no matter what. It really doesn't matter what they do to us because we're just going to bring in all our pieces. If they pin this knight, I honestly don't care. I'm going to bring in the knight too, and you won't have any way to stop this checkmate. Here's a practical example. If they try to take our rook, all we have to do is bring in the bishop. If they capture with the knight, it's checkmate with the queen. And if they move the king, well, we could also checkmate in more than one way. But why make things complicated if, instead of bringing in the bishop, we should think about which piece is getting in the way of checkmate? The knight. So I'm going to take it out. If you capture it, I'll checkmate you, and that's it. This knight can't go anywhere, and if they do anything else, it really doesn't matter to us. So we'll capture the knight, and when they recapture, now we can go in for checkmate. In this case, we'd play queen to h7, checkmate, king to f8, and then queen takes f7, checkmate. I hope you really enjoyed this video. If you like the way I explain things and all the concepts I shared, I'd really appreciate it if you gave me a big thumbs up. It doesn't cost you anything, and it makes me really happy. If you like this board with coordinates, I'm going to make more explanatory videos using it since I really enjoy recording this kind of video, if you'll pardon the redundancy. Plus, today I recorded sitting here at the table, so I got tired a lot less than usual. I was able to explain things much more clearly. I hope you all really enjoyed this video, friends, and I'll see you tomorrow, as always, with another new video. Goodbye.